greenhouse gases.
So I got a little question then.
Yeah, go ahead.
So obviously, and including in this book as well too, they do paint the picture of the negative world, and they bring
Mm-hmm.
that negatives forward.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I do understand that it's very important to have that negative perspective in the back of your mind at least. But I think one
Mm.
thing that's really important is to have the positive imagery of what it could be in the front of your mind. So if do you know of any potential facts of optimism that people can hold on to kind of give themselves some encouragement going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you'd have to look into like the history books more or less. Like you look at the previous ecological problems that we had to face. Like I don't know if you remember, like in the late 90s, we kind of still heard about stuff about the ozone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the ozone hole. And I just did some research and found out that basically it started about like at the end of the 1970s, and it was about 16.3 million kilometers wide, kilometers squared, and now they're predicting that by 2060 it's going to be recovered to pre-1970 conditions. So
Oh
I think
wow.
that's like really amazing. And how did we do that?
Yeah.
We banded together like as a planet, and we just decided to ban CFCs, which are like the hairspray products and stuff like that, like the aerosols,
Yeah.
and take that product out, and we managed, right? So I definitely think that was like a big win. Another thing you look back is like whaling was a huge thing. Like, and it's so like these wins are
Huge.
so crazy. Like that when people think about them now, people almost don't think about them. That's how good they were, right?
Yeah.
That like they're forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like yeah, looking at the Atlantic humpback whale, by the 50s, there's only 450 of them,
Wow.
right? And now they are like now it's estimated that 90% of the population is back to pre-whaling
Oh
conditions.
really?
So like that's huge, and like so much so that like no one talks about the humpback whales because
Yeah.
they're good, they're all right.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, there's a quote from a different book which I think was really cool. It basically said like a narrative pessimistic narrative is really easy because it's usually you talk about events and stuff that happened just recently. It's fresh in our minds, right? And I think like a great example is be COVID, right? Like it's like oh, like it's right there. It happened, and it's I don't want to say it's a one-off, but like it's very right there. It doesn't require a lot of research. It's very in your face. It's like look,
Mm-hmm.
this happened, right? But like a optimistic narrative is definitely more about like doing the research and like cause like doing good stuff takes time, right? Like usually, especially it's more worth it if it like takes
Mm-hmm.
time and like you've put in the effort, right? And like so it takes time. You have to look back and yeah, it requires to think more about the past.
Yeah.
And people don't tend to forget about the effort that was made, right? For
Mm-hmm.
example, like the whaling, right? That's huge. So it's very interesting to see how that takes place. But like I mean, right now currently, it sounds really, it sounds like we're basically up against it, right? It feels like I felt like this before. It feels like that basically it's the 11th hour, and there's nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also great to remember that there's been people in history that have also been up against it, but they've been able to make drastic changes to society. Like you think of Martin Luther King and all the stuff he did for civil rights. You think about like the suffragettes and like the voting movement. They definitely did stuff like like the stuff was pretty bleak for them, but
Yeah.
they rallied, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, we can either choose to sit in our negative narrative and just be like, well, yeah, it's never gonna get better,
Mm-hmm.
or we can like start taking the steps, right? And like there's already stuff that is going on. Like I mentioned, it's like good stories take research and take time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, in the UK, is already using 50% renewable energy. Costa Rica is 100% renewable already, and I just found out a couple days ago that Spain is already also 50%
Mm-hmm.
renewable. So it's not nothing out of this world. Like it is very doable, and within 10 years, um, there's a very doable timeline. We haven't like um, pushed ourselves like all the way to the very last minute, right? So we still there's still hope for humanity for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, for sure. And like I think it's also important to know is that these steps that we're making, like what's gonna make difference, it's not like a linear thing. It's not like, oh, okay, we're here, and if we get to this, like we don't know what's gonna make the big impact to help the planet, right?
Yeah.
So all these little actions eventually, who knows what action is gonna be the one to tip the scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're facing a very multi-dimensional issue where it's not like a one-off, like the whaling, right? For example, we're facing like an issue that's has problems in all different aspects. For example, from ocean acidification to greenhouse gases and overall temperature rise to deforestation to habitat loss and extinction, right? Like these are all things that um, are tied together to some extent, right? Some stronger than others, like for example, ocean acidification and greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
But in a way, they're it's a multi-dimensional problem that requires fixing. We've never, like as a species, been up against something that's so problem that's so robust, right? But yeah, no, and I think definitely too is you often think about like just like the power of corporations and stuff like that. And you think it's huge, and you think like that. Oh, there's no way that corporations like are really divesting from fuel, which is, but it really isn't. Like the book mentions too about the Norwegian fund, like they're the Norwegian Parliament Fund, which is $3 trillion in size, and they've divested 13 billion, sorry,
Yeah.
from
The B.
with B, yeah, billion with a B from fossil fuels,
Mm-hmm.
while also investing 20 billion into renewables, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a big step. What else do you want to talk? Like, I could mention here,
Yeah.
that OPEC, like the people who are in charge of like setting oil prices more or less, and like the ones that oversee everything.
Mm-hmm.
They've mentioned in the book too is that their biggest threat is people divesting from natural gas projects, or like sorry, natural gas, but like fossil fuel projects. So
Mm-hmm.
we are definitely having an impact, right? And I think too, even if you look at the local scale here in Alberta, you know, like 5 years ago, what we had, um, you really couldn't go into like a fast food place and be like, hey, can I get a Beyond Beef burger? They'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, they'd be like, what are you talking about right now?
Yeah, stop smoking crack, kid.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
get out, like it's a burger place, get a
Yeah.
burger,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, no, but now, the or like the paper straw, like I'll be say how everyone feels with paper straw, but like that's a push that was made, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the paper bag, like, and did that solve all the problems? No, but like those were big changes that were
Mm-hmm.
pushed on by consumers to corporations, and companies listen.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and these changes aren't the ones that make the front page, because, like I said, they take time and they're not flashy. They're not like, here you go. Like you really have to dig for them
Mm-hmm.
and wait too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no. So I definitely think there's and I think it just speaks a lot to the nature of optimism too. It's because people think optimism is being all happy and peppy, but it's really not. You know, like it's really easy to be optimistic when you're winning, like,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so
When
it's
things
like
are going
when
good.
things are going good, you know.
Yeah.
And I think like just being a fan of any sports team when they're doing shitty is a very very like good analogy for this. Like, yeah, like if your team's doing good, like the Oilers, everyone's like super
Yeah,
on,
first
super
10 games of the season, everybody's
great. Everyone loves
happy.
them,
Yeah, they don't
and
mind paying
then
taxes. Everybody's happy.
and then when you know when they start doing it, or like Canucks too, like, and then at the moment they start losing, like everyone's like, he needs to go, he needs to get
He's
fired.
outta
Like
here. Yeah.
everyone's out for blood, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Literally.
but optimism isn't that. Optimism isn't something that you do when you're celebrating. Optimism is gritty. Optimism is like you put in the work and you stick through it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's tough because that's what makes it more rewarding too, right? Like that you actually like fought for it.
Yeah. It's something you have to work for.
Exactly,
You can't just wake up
absolutely.
in the morning and have optimism.
No, absolutely, and
Um,
it's yeah, like it's basically the idea of like that you are willing to face challenge head on.
mhm.
Yeah,
So I think another thing that I came across in the book as well too,
yeah.
something that
It's off the dome. Come check it out.
Escape reality with Matt Z.
Well, Dak, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellent.